This video is in collaboration with Warhawk's Horse and Musket team. Warhawk shows excellent high-quality battles from the American Civil War, and are now expanding to other conflicts with the coming Horse and Musket series. During the War of the Spanish Succession, the Great Northern War raged on at the exact same time. Subscribe to Warhawk to witness the upcoming Horse and Musket series. Last episode, we covered the opening moves and the first few battles of the War of the Spanish Succession in Europe. Flanders and the Rhine were Bourbon's successes. Eugen pushed forward in Italy, and the Allies both blundered and succeeded in Spain, convincing the Portuguese to join the Grand Alliance. The French Marshal Claude de Villars had been successful on the Rhine, winning the Battle of Friedlingen and coming closer and closer to his ally, the Elector of Bavaria. The plan was to group up with the Bavarians and march towards the imperial capital of Vienna. Such a plan was daring for Villars' time, and the next year would decide if it were to be possible. After Friedlingen, Villars moved to lay siege to the fortress of Kehl, directly opposite of the city of Strasbourg. It fell on the 10th of March. Meanwhile, the field marshal of Allied forces in the Rhine, the Duke of Marlborough, made his first move, capturing the city of Bonn and forcing the surrender of the French garrison. Back to the Rhine, the marshal moved towards the city of Höchstadt after news of the fall of the city of Augsburg to von Baden's Imperials. In Höchstadt was the Count of Styrum and the Prince of Anhalt-Dessau. Villars needed to reach the Bavarian Elector, Maximilian II, as he was surrounded by the Imperials. Vendôme appeared near the Tyrol, keeping the area secure from imperial attack. Villars moved to the Rhine, capturing fortresses like Hansach and its garrisons with little to no fight. Near the city of Rüdlingen, French scouts came into contact with the Elector's forces and the man himself. Much needed good news after a long march. Villars and the Elector embraced each other upon meeting. Max Emanuel gave Villars the honor of reviewing the Bavarian soldiers. Villars was quite impressed. He knew soldiers with fight in them when he saw them. The Marshal and the Elector made plans to defeat the Count of Styrum and reach the fortified town of Dillingen. News came back that a small Bavarian force was defeated at a skirmish in Amberg in May. This discouraged Max Emanuel from moving on Vienna. Villars attempted to convince him to move on, and that the loss of a few hundred men wouldn't make a dent in the plan. But for Villars' time period, a large, speedy offensive into Vienna was just not doable without great loss. The organization and logistics necessary for such a blitzkrieg did not yet exist. If such an offensive were attempted, the Franco-Bavarian army would find itself lost deep in Austrian territory, with no hope of rescue. Not to mention, it would have opened up the Spanish Netherlands to Marlborough, and southeastern France to the Prince Eugen. News grew worse for Villars from the French court. French courtiers were upset with Villars' habit of disobeying commands from the king if it meant victory. During the time of Villars, all were expected to stay in their rightful place in French society. Villars was especially concerned about the safety of his newborn son and his wife, which he now brought with him on campaign. This too outraged the court. King Louis himself insisted that she stay with him in Paris, where she would be kept safe. But Villars proved far too stubborn. Such stubbornness didn't help Villars' image amongst the French court. On the 14th of June, Max Emanuel suddenly left Munich to swiftly seize the fortress of Kufstein, and appeared before Innsbruck on the 26th. Even Villars was impressed with the quick movement of the Elector, but contradicted himself by writing to the king that the Elector's attack would compromise the attack on Vienna. He called for the cooperation of Vendôme, but that man was staying on the banks of Lake Garda. Eugen exploited the inaction and armed the peasants of the Tyrol, extremely loyal to the Austrian Habsburgs. Maximilian was forced to retreat back to the fortress of Kufstein, still waiting for Vendôme. Villars, frustrated, could only remain defensive on the Danube, as he held all approaches from Dawnworth and Ulm. On the 31st of July, Villars' cavalry urgently reported an imperial detachment crossing the Danube, threatening Villars' left flank. They were driven off, but Villars learned of a plan of the Count of Styrum to attack his rear, and Baden from the front. The marshal entrenched his forces, and called for the Elector's support. News finally came on the 17th of September that Sturm finally began to march to Dawnworth. Villars again called for the Elector to attack, and he began to march with General d'Usson, who would attack from the rear with 8,000 infantry and 4,000 cavalry. On the 19th, the Elector joined Villars without much suspicion from Sturm. The Count spotted Villars and Maximilian's army 2 hours away. Instead of continuing his march, he attacked General d'Usson's smaller force instead. D'Usson cut his way through the attacking Imperials, but with heavy losses. He fiercely fought his way back to Unterglaubheim. His battalion suffered losses as high as 50%. But he still held the village at point-blank range. Fortunately, d'Usson's men held out long enough for Villars and Maximilian to arrive. Villars saw how mauled the Imperial battalions were, and ordered an all-out cavalry charge on the flanks. The Imperial cavalry once again panicked and fled. The infantry, however, withstood the Franco-Bavarian fire, parade ground precision, encouraged by the Count of Sturm himself, who rode up and down the line, exposing himself to the withering fire. Villars, tired of the slow battle, would snap the Imperials with the French and Bavarian bayonet. Casualties were again high on both sides. Sturm fled the field with 2,000 men dead and 3,700 prisoners, 18 standards, 14 flags, and 33 cannon lost. The Franco-Bavarians, 1,000 dead and wounded. These losses were blamed on Villars' late arrival to d'Usson's aid. After the Battle of Hochstadt, Maximilian had a falling out with Villars, and decided to march to Augsburg himself, worrying that Baden would attack the Bavarian capital of Munich. He was disappointed when Baden refused to give battle. So was Villars. He was furious at Maximilian. The two commanders, who once respected one another, now only insulted each other. After both sent complaints to Versailles, Louis XIV ordered Villars relieved of command. He was replaced by Marshal Marsan. Louis promised Villars he would be placed in a theater where his talents would not be wasted. But it couldn't help Villars' disappointment. But it may have been for the best. Otherwise, history might have seen him attempt the impossible task of concentrating such a large force deep into imperial territory. The campaigns of 1702 and 1703 in the Rhine showed that Villars was France's most competent commander, but his recklessness when it came to obeying his sovereign quickly made him widely unpopular in the French court and among his subordinates. Meanwhile, Marshal Tallard, Camille de Houston, surprised the Allies at the Battle of Speyerbach on the 15th of November, a surprising move for Tallard, but delivered a good victory with the Allied Hessians and other German Imperials routed with heavy losses. The war seemed like it was moving into favor of the Bourbons, driving the Imperials away in the Rhine, allowing for lines to be restored with the Bavarians. Marlborough had moved very little, but that was about to change. Prince Eugen had long returned from Italy since his victories in 1701 and 1702. They were to meet each other and combine their forces to attack Marshal Tallard. Next episode, we will finally witness one of the largest and most important battles of the whole war and of modern history, the Battle of Blenheim.